This is Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. The target audience of this vid is medical billing professionals. This is a book review. Sharon Hollander. Sharon Hollander's book is great. She is an author, an entrepreneur, healthcare consultant in the area of practice management. She's also president of Stat Medical Consulting. She's a graduate with a bachelor's degree in psychology and physiology from New York University in Toronto, Canada. York University in Toronto, Canada. She lives in West San Fernando Valley in Southern California with her Labradoodle, Jason, who manages his own company, petjason.com. Visit Hollander online, SharonHollander.com. That's the end of my book review. Sharon's book is great. The next 40 minutes, I will read excerpt screenshots from Sharon's book. They were specifically selected by me with medical billing professionals in mind. Medical billing professionals, please, I'm begging, I'll do anything, por favor. Think of your client doctors like Drake, the Canadian hip-hop star. Drake sings, "Got a lot of enemies. Got a lot of enemies, got a lot of enemies, got a lot of people trying to drain me of my energies." Medical billing professionals, your doctor clients have a lot of potential enemies. Unlike Drake, these enemies don't all have malicious intent. Instead, a doctor can pay a career-ending penalty with a lost license from someone else's incompetence. Now consider unbundling. Now this is the most, from reading Sharon's book, this seems to be the most, this reveals itself as one of the most benign ways, non-malicious ways a doctor can end up breaking the law. So since I don't know a whole lot about medical billing, but I do know a lot about bicycle maintenance. I'm a bicycle enthusiast today, though I don't own a bicycle. I use share bikes. Back in the day, I was a bicycle enthusiast, recreational, commuter, off-road, road biking, and so on. I was also a garage mechanic. So I do know some things about bicycle maintenance. So please, everyone, even if you don't have the experience I have, listeners, you can imagine this comparison, and I deliberately put this in my handwriting to differentiate from the professional presentation of Sharon. The excerpts from her book will look like excerpts from a book. This, of course, is different. So first, the words, spring tune-up. That's a commonly used phrase when you take a bicycle into the shop, and a professional will check the tires, the brakes, and the chain. Tires often lose pressure over the winter, and someone that doesn't do his or her own bike maintenance needs a professional to do that. Brakes, the shoes, literally the rubber gets hard and sometimes needs to be replaced just because the bike has been sitting, and oftentimes the chain needs to be cleaned and or lubricated. So these are three things that are often bundled together. A bicycle shop will call that a spring tune-up. Now listeners, just imagine this. Forget about medical billing for a minute. Think of this example within the context of bicycles. You go into a shop and they advertise a $100 spring tune-up right here. Now they have tires, chains, and brakes. They'll do that work for $40 a piece. Now if you do 40 and 40 and 40, then you end up with 120. But they advertise this, 100. So you get tires, chains, and brakes done, and the mechanic is a new employee, and he or she says tires 40, chains 40, brakes, and charges you 120. You walk out, you're happy with the work, but you look at your receipt and you say, wait a minute, they had a $100 spring tune-up, I paid 120. You go back in, and the owner of the store or the mechanic who did this, made this mistake, this oversight, says, oh yeah, we're sorry, and they refund you $20. This is a benign mistake. Now, this same mistake in the context of Sharon's book gets described, and I think in the context of Sharon's book and in the industry, this is called unbundling. In other words, spring tune-up is a bundling of these three mechanical processes. So if you unbundle, is what the mechanic did unintentionally, tires, chains, and brakes, ended up charging 120 instead of 100. Now that's called unbundling. They took this discounted rate and charged you for the individual pieces. Now in the context of a bicycle, that's an oversight. It's forgivable. We'll give you your 20 bucks back. Everything's forgotten. But in the context of medical, the doctor has broken the law. Now that is the easiest mistake someone can imagine. They take multiple medical procedures that have been bundled together, and instead of billing them at the bundled rate, they bill at the individual rate. This is a mistake that can easily be made by a new employee, even if the staff is properly trained. I mean, it can be done oversight from a competent employee, but it can also be done from a new employee with ineffective training or incomplete training. So that is the example I pull out of Sharon's work to illustrate Drake. Got a lot of enemies, got a lot of enemies. So someone else's competence can end up causing a doctor to pay. Now, I don't mean to say doctors are innocent victims, because at times they are perpetrators of fraud. They are victims of their own incompetence. The slide shown, now the rest of the slides, I'm referring to the following slide, Sharon's screenshots, not my own handwritten one that's here. The slides shown in this vid are on Flickr with a link where one would expect to find it. And any one of the slides can be captured with a shared link. In effect, I am taking Sharon's book and cutting it into bite-sized pieces for medical billing professionals. Once I begin reading the words of Sharon, I will not have any of my own words. I begin reading Billing Stories by Sharon Hollander now. Psychiatry case study. A psychiatrist was happy with the reimbursement from Medicare, was unhappy, and claimed she spent the maximum allotted time based on her highest level of care. She decided that in order to get paid fairly for her time spent, she billed 3 consecutive dates of service. But the patient was only seen on the first one. The patient received a copy of her explanation of benefits and filed a complaint. The psychiatrist was fired and eliminated from participating in the Medicare program indefinitely. The medical board is still investigating revoking her license. 1996, Congress made healthcare fraud a federal crime, a felony. Even minor billing errors can be considered fraud, and small samples of claims can be examined, and fines implemented with only guesstimates made and extrapolated claim data from across the practice. An ambulatory care center in Beverly Hills submitted claims on behalf of a patient for long extended care. The patient was paid the insurance reimbursement directly, In this case, the payment was in excess of $25,000 for the ASC and the surgeon bills combined. When the patient was contacted to return the money owed, she replied, "Sorry, spent it. I built a swimming pool." The provider was forced to incur legal fees and court costs to sue the patient. It is against the law for doctors to waive annual deductibles. A list of clearinghouses: Allscripts, Availity, Capario, MDeon, WebMD, Gateway EDI, GE Healthcare, Office Alley, Optum Insight, Practice Insight, Real Med, Relay Health, Zirmed. Family practice case study. A family practice provider submitted claims on behalf of his spouse and other family members so that they could meet their deductibles with his submitted claims. The provider was fined $10,000 per year per claim infraction. His billing practice were considered evidence of billing fraud, calling his license to be suspended, and further penalties incurred. Cash flow case study. Once I had a heated discussion with a provider who said he didn't want to participate with a certain PPO because he would be paid more for care by being a non-participating provider. Whereas that may be true, it was my intention that he would have the money faster if he agreed to participate. We went back and forth on the definition of income. He said having more money wasn't about getting more money faster. My position was that income was defined by money received now. In his bank account, I encouraged to participate because he would actually improve cash flow. Due to the nature of his specific practice, it was a more advantage to him to have the money in his hand, getting more potential money in the future. In most cases, it's illegal to ask other practices for what they charge. You can't go to another primary care physician who is not part of your office and say, "What do you charge for this code?" It's an antitrust violation. Internal medicine case study. An internal medical doctor complained of cash flow issues. In reviewing his charges, I found he hadn't updated his fee schedule in 10 years. As a result, fees were below the Medicare allowed amount. If the fee is lower than the Medicare allowed amount, Medicare will pay the lower fee. After hanging up the phone and talking to his biller, Dr. Winters determined that his biller had transposed ICD-9 code instead of using the code 300.0. She had submitted the bills to Medicare with the code 030.0, the code for leprosy. Dr. Winters' office contacted Mr. Jones and other non-Medicare patients and told them to notify their commercial insurance of the office's mistake. Mr. Jones did not seek new employment. However, his insurance company still shows a history of leprosy in the patient's database of coverage. He will be charged insurance companies in the rears. It's an ugly head again. Missing or incorrect billing code modifiers are the most common reason claims are denied. The most common issues that plague medical practice management are employee turnover, employee theft and embezzlement, cash flow delays, increased demands with limited time, credentialing, errors, delaying claim payments, contracting issues. Orthopedic case study. An orthopedic surgeon in San Diego has deputized his office manager with signing authority on the business checking account. The surgeon justified his decision because he was too busy performing surgery. It was the office manager's responsibility to pay the bills and placate vendors, to seem to always be calling the practice and demanding payment. He believed her when she indicated that the billing service was failing to do its job effectively, and so he changed billing companies. After 4 years and 3 billing companies, one such company scheduled a monthly meeting, as was their habit. The day of that meeting, the office manager called in sick. Unbeknownst to the doctor's office manager, had set up a joint checking account as the co-signer. It turned out the doctor had, in fact, signed a signature card for the joint account, but he had no memory of doing so. The office manager had managed to siphon off $100,000 of the doctor's business account into her own personal account. After further investigation, we determined that Medicare did not have the physician credentialed as an oncologist, and therefore, myth, billing companies have never met my expectation. Fact, realistic expectations are paramount to having a positive experience with outsourcing your billing. A billing company that can guarantee payment in 4 days is false. The only certainty a billing company compliance programs for physicians. Why not do everything you can to avoid an audit? Doctors have to be proactive to avoid any scrutiny and comply with regulations. Regardless of the size of your practice, all providers need a written and operational compliance plan. The Office of the Inspector General, OIG, has laid the framework for compliance plans for physician practices. Bad faith insurance means that an insurance company has illegally denied, or delayed payment of a valid claim. Doing so can have consequences for your practice and your patients. Insurers have duty to act in faith towards their policy holders. Failure to do so can be considered bad faith insurance. If this happens, your patient may be eligible for filing a lawsuit against the insurance company. In cases where the insurance company conducted is beyond reasonable, punitive damages may be awarded. Case study. I went to the nearest hospital after calling 911 for a debilitating headache. Worst in my life. When I got there, I was told I had suffered a stroke. It nearly killed me. So far, my insurance company has refused to pay the $345,000 in medical bills I received after a 5-week stay in the hospital. The reason, a coding error. The hospital bill was coded only as a headache. I had tried to argue with my insurance company that a person doesn't stay in a hospital for 5 weeks for a headache, but I got nowhere. I'm waiting for the hospital to correct their coding mistake. It has been 3 months. Post-payment audit. Often, a random question from medical records by third party, insurance carriers, or Medicare administrative contractors. CMS, Center for Medical Services, has expanded its audit recovery system, RAC, program for medical claims already filed or billed. ZPIC, Zone, Program, Integrity Contractors. OIG, Office Inspector General Auditors. Concierge, Medical Case Study. An internal medical provider feeling the crunches for reimbursement set out to convert his practice to a concierge practice. For a flat annual fee, he was offering patients 3-day appointments and 24-hour access, more FaceTime with the doctor, and extra preventative care. His fee was $6,000 per patient per year. Unfortunately, however, he ran into legal troubles when he converted his practice and included his Medicare patients into his coverage model. He was investigated and fined, violation for assignment with medical care and OIG of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Because he was told he could not charge a membership and administrative fee, he was providing services already covered and allowed by Medicare. Charging a patient directly for medical coverage services was considered double billing. Covered entities that outsource some of their business processes to a third party must be ensured that their vendors also have a framework in place to comply with HIPAA requirements. The vendors include medical transcription and billing companies. Pharmaceutical case study. Auditors found that 324 pharmacies were paid prescriptions, purportedly written by 82 doctors who were already dead. Pharmacies received about $50,000 of prescriptions from doctors who had been dead for at least 6 months, sometimes more than 2 years. Penalties, case studies. 2 emergency room nurses each took a photo of an x-ray of a patient who was admitted to an emergency room with an object lodged in his rectum. One nurse was accused of posting it on Facebook. Both nurses were immediately fired from the hospital, and a $20,000 fine was imposed for each nurse. Orthopedic physician case study. An orthopedic physician was sentenced to 10 years in prison and ordered to pay $7.9 million in restitution after she accepted cash payments for signing pre-printed prescriptions with certificates of medical necessity for motorized wheelchairs and beneficiaries she never examined. For more than 60 DME companies received Medicare and Medicare payments based on her fraudulent prescriptions. It is against the law to pay except for referrals within the federal health care program. It is illegal for a provider to accept payment from providers and suppliers in return for referral for Medicare and Medicaid patients. It is illegal for you to pay others, refer Medicare and Medicaid patients to you. Orthopedic case study. 2 orthopedic surgeons paid $450,000 and $250,000 to settle allegations related to improper medical directorships with a company that operated a diagnostic imaging center, rehabilitation facility, and ambulatory surgical center. The company allegedly provided the physicians with valuable compensation, included free use of the corporate jet under the medical directorship agreements, which required the physicians to remain in limited service in return. The agreements with the physician allegedly called for the redundant services to be encouraged to physicians to refer their patients to facilities operated by the company. Unbundling of codes. Unbundling is breaking apart codes that are inclusive of other codes. This not only affects reimbursement, but it is illegal to do, and it will trigger an audit. Now, post comments. That long pause was me reaching the end of the slides without realizing it. In addition to that, I wanted to leave. I intentionally, so that part of that pause was unintentional, part was intentional. I wanted to leave, I intended to leave a pause to indicate the words of Sharon Hollander were over. So when I was reading slides that look like this, these are slides from Sharon's book. Her book is called Medical Billing Horror Stories. Now, I will say that the doctor in handcuffs is attractive, probably promoted by her publisher, is my guess, because I don't really sense that, because it's sensational cover. You know, it wants to kind of promote fear. Doctors, you might end up in jail. This is the picture I'm talking about. I cropped it, and the cover of her book, and cover of Sharon's book, you actually have both hands, and those are handcuffs. So it's kind of a sensational, fear-mongering sort of image, and it is not for no good reason. It is for good reason. Doctors do go to prison, as you see in some of these excerpts, and you see in many more excerpts in Sharon's book. However, the content of her book, the tone of her book, isn't really captured by this image. Her book is much more, it's not like a collection of horror stories that you might see on TMZ. It's not like that. Her book, in context, is much more comprehensive. And, however, it's an effective cover. And it is valid, though sensationalized. The cover, that is. Her book is more comprehensive and more tone appropriate. I can't say enough about Sharon Hollander's book. I believe that she has written a book that has really patched a lot of the holes of all these specialties within the medical industry. People are medical billers, and they get expert in medical billing. People are physicians. They get expert in their being a doctor, and then furthermore in their specialty, a nurse, and a phlebotomist, a medical administrator, a hospital administrator. These people get specialized. And then next thing you know, these things kind of fall through the cracks, and someone goes to jail. Well, that someone is almost always a physician. These people, things fall through the cracks. They get unnoticed. They accumulate. And someone loses his or her license. That someone is usually a physician. The persons that pay the penalty of their career, of penalties, financial penalties, and sometimes their freedom, although jail sentences don't tend to be real long, sometimes the loss of a license, though it is deemed temporary, can be extensive. So again, my final message to medical billing professionals, please, I'm begging, I'll do anything, por favor. Recognize that your clients are like Drake, the Canadian superstar hip-hop artist. Got a lot of enemies, got a lot of enemies, got a lot of people trying to drain me of my energies. There's a lot of people that can make mistakes, and those mistakes, whether intentional, fraud, or unintentional, can represent significant penalties paid by the physician. So I'm not telling you what to do about this. I am telling you, if you are aware of this fact and sensitive to how you can be a trusted and trustworthy voice to your physicians, the fact that you know they're hanging out, and sometimes they feel like it, that they don't know who to trust. Their trusted office manager. In the case of this woman, was a male doctor and a female office manager. He had trusted her with a complete authorization of office management and the banking. And she bilked him for $100,000. All of a sudden, imagine yourself as that doctor. Stupidly, he overtrusted her and overtrusted the wrong her. And now the doctor has good reason to think, well, who can I trust? If a medical billing company has been that trusted voice and continues to be trustworthy, recognizes the risks that physicians take, and can be sensitive to the situation the physician, he or she, is in, especially in a traumatizing event, that medical biller, personally, the medical billing company as an organization, can continue to be a trusted and trustworthy voice to that physician. This has been Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey. I'm going to read Sharon's credentials one more time. Sharon Hollander, an author, entrepreneur, and healthcare consultant in the area of practice management. She is also president of STAT Medical Consulting. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology and physiology from York University in Toronto, Canada. She lives in the west side of San Fernando Valley in Southern California with her Labradoodle, who manages his own company at petjason.com. Visit hollanderonline.com. Listeners, my own words, I switched to my own words. It appears that Sharon has a dog and that dog has a website. So it was only during this presentation that I realized that. So it appears that Sharon has a Labrador, which she tongue-in-cheek calls a Labradoodle, and that dog has its own website. So don't overlook that, as I did in the earlier readings. So once again, I finish with this point. The Drake analogy is simple. Got a lot of enemies, got a lot of enemies, got a lot of people trying to drain me of my energies. Once again, medical billing professionals, recognize your doctors can pay for their own mistakes and they can pay for the mistakes of others. Sometimes they are the perpetrators of fraud themselves, and sometimes they're relatively innocent oversights, non-malicious accidents, non-malicious errors, non-malicious oversights that they end up paying severe penalties for. And sometimes those penalties, including a loss of freedom with a relatively short jail sentence, and sometimes a much more severe penalty with the loss of their professional credentials. It's been Tom Duty, middle-aged American, living in New Jersey, near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search for my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, and restful night's sleep. Ciao. I have done this without the pre-authorization of Sharon Hollander. She has reason to kind of fault me for, overusing her material. Of course, I've done everything to give her credit, but if she does